Okay, let's call ourselves to order. Thanks, everybody. Thank everybody for coming. Anyone listening at this or this meeting is available by Zoom if necessary. You can find the codes. Probably everyone wants to already has. So our meeting is to discuss the conceptual design for the Mill Pond All Persons Trail. So we'll leave it up to our designer, Trent Lloyd.
And just to preface a bit, while Trent is going to be presenting some ideas, I just want to emphasize, I think everyone knows this, it's a totally participatory meeting. The whole point is to get input.
Definitely.
This is not a proposal to vote up or down. This is some ideas to put on the table to get people talking and to start to hopefully get some direction from the community on what, if anything, we might want to look to that Mill Pond. So trying to put together some slides, so take it away.
Okay. Well, I think I've met most of you through Zoom or in person. Thanks for coming. We thought it was a beautiful summer night. Good night. Anyway, okay, we can start with the next slide. Mill Pond. So I just wanted to acknowledge that this idea of an all access trail has been talked about for a really long time. Since 1996, it's been on the open space and recreation plan. So, and it's been in 5 different plans. So this is not a new topic. We're about 18 years later, and we actually have a design on a piece of paper, which is really exciting, but it's not a new idea, and it feels like it's something that people are really excited about. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So again, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to hear me, you've heard this before, but I'm just gonna repeat it and I'll be fast. I want to just give you some orient you to where we were in this process. So we started with the site analysis, where we got a survey of the property. We met with 4 committees. We got feedback. We analyzed the property. I took all that information. I did 2 different designs. We met with the town staff. The town staff and I made that into one design that we're going to present to you tonight at this public workshop, where we're really looking to hear your thoughts on what we've designed. And then what we'll do is we'll take your feedback, do one more design, and then we'll be able to get down and dirty and figure out what are the permitting requirements, how are we going to pay for this, what are the construction companies that would be viable for this. So so that's that. Next slide. So just to keep you, remind you, this is what we're talking about. This section in yellow, nothing outside that section. So this is again, that's what we're focusing on tonight, that area.
Oh, I don't think they started yet. She started or she started?
Every single meeting. Okay, so this was the site analysis diagram that I presented to most of you during the workshops, but it basically just separated these 4 different layers. The first is circulation, the second is topography, the third is like some jurisdiction. So basically the Conservation Commission has jurisdiction over the site, and then the 4th was the tree canopy. Next slide, sorry. Okay, so the 4 committees that we did visioning workshops with, the Mill Pond Committee, the Parks and Rec, the Open Space Committee, and the Select Board. We recorded all the comments, and we got a total of 185 comments from those four groups. And we started out with, we asked each group, what do you see? What is Mill Pond? What do you observe there? And we each committee has their comments listed here. So everything everybody said was written down and recorded. But what I did is I read all through all these comments and I summarized them. So what the bulk of the comment said was, we love the rustic natural appearance of Mill. But the parking, unfortunately, is uncontrolled. As you can see, these cars where it says no parking are parked in front of the pond, so it's sort of ill-defined, uncontrolled. There's a lot of erosion, the trails are muddy. We love the recreational part of Mill Pond. There's horses, there's dogs, there's biking, there's fishing. We love that. And sometimes the dogs and horses have, different interests, but that's just part of the deal. But it's really a special, beautiful place that West Newbury loves. So that's the bulk of what I heard. If you want to see every single comment, it's up on the website. But that's what I summarized there. The next slide. So the next thing I asked the groups were, tell me, like, what do you see as sort of the principles, the overriding principles of this park? Like, what matters most to you? What do you want Mill Pond to represent? What are sort of the high level concepts here? And the comments that we heard a lot was preservation. Like the beauty of the place is the natural environment, so let's preserve it. So that was a big part. The second thing was all access. Like, we want this place to be easy for strollers, for wheelchairs, for elderly. We want everyone to be able to enjoy it. So an all access park. And then we want to maintain the natural beauty, and we want some organized expectations for when you come there. So we want better signage. We want people to understand, where they can ride horses, where the all access trail is. We want it to be a little more organized than it is now. Okay, next slide. And then I said, okay, well, you've told me what you've observed, you've given your overriding sort of principle. So tell me, like, how should we accomplish this? What are your ideas? So the ideas that we heard were, again, preservation, preserve the natural setting, relocate the parking behind the cabin, reclaim the scenic view from the cabin, improve signage, clearly define parking, encourage programmed events, improve maintenance, and we want well-drained dry trails. So here we are. That's what we did. We took all those ideas, and we came up with a design, and this is what it is. As you can see here, here's the cabin. We have the parking lot behind the cabin. We have a parking lot in front of the trailhead. We've gotten rid of the road that goes in front of the pond. We'll maintain that for any sort of emergency vehicle if it's necessary. And we made the trail 6 to 8 feet wide, and so it's all up. So here are some drawings that are just kind of going to give you a visual sense of what it would look like.
Do you mind if we ask questions as we go
Oh,
along?
yeah.
The last slide, is that the all access trail that swings way around and goes into the woods, and then it looks like there's a little rest area there? Is that?
Yeah, so the all access trail, we just encircle this
Okay.
part of the pond. Yeah. So here it is a little more up close. I don't need to talk too much, because you can kind of see what it is. We can go to the next slide.
Trent, in eliminating the road along the edge of the pond, is there also not going to be a trail along the edge of the pond
Yeah, so
between the
no,
driveway
it
and
would
the dock?
just be lawn. It would just be, and you can decide what you want to cut or not. In this, this was just like a particular area that I showed it would be cut, but no, it would be lawn. And it would be, we might put bollards up or something, but it would be available if the emergency vehicle needed to get access to the pond, but essentially the road would go away, and that goes in front of the pond.
Or what about a trail along?
I mean, you could, that's definitely an idea, and we're taking notes, right? Yeah, so if that's something that is of interest.
I agree. I
Um,
think if you don't make one,
right, yeah,
you know,
I mean, horses
I
come
think
down the
it's
road and
vision.
cut through, so that it would become a trail. They'd probably not want to go up behind the building with vehicles on
Right.
it.
Right,
Yeah.
so a trail where the road is now, but it's like a 6 foot wide trail.
I do like the fact though, that if we were to ever have enough snow to do winter carnival again, we don't have a road for kids sledding down the hill.
Right,
Because they sled out on the pond and it's pretty treacherous to cross the gravel road.
right. Yeah,
If there's a trail there, would it make sense? You mentioned that there would continue to be access for emergency vehicles. How wide would that trail have to be? How would the surface of that trail have to be able to support? Not to be road-like, but to be able to carry an emergency vehicle if it had to. So,
Right.
for instance, if it was, if it was grass or field or lawn or whatever, whatever it were, instead of a trail, in certain times of the year, you really wouldn't want to drive on that, with a vehicle that weighs 30,000 pounds.
Right.
Fire engine or something, it would
Yeah.
sink in and we'd be towing it out of there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
so I guess the question is, how wide does that have to be to
Yeah.
support a vehicle?
that's a good question, and we were lucky enough when we had our town meeting that the fire chief actually joined us, and he honestly, he felt like he didn't even need that. He
Yeah.
didn't even, he was okay with just this, to be honest, and, we would have the, turning radius for a fire truck, et cetera. It was sort of this idea of keeping it open for a vehicle if necessary was honestly just something that made people feel more comfortable.
Okay,
So it's not, doesn't have to be that way for like code or anything like that. But that's a great question, and that detail, and we'll remember that, and we'll ask, the fire chief, and this is all gonna go through sort of public safety, right?
yeah, and I'm not pushing
Yeah.
for a road for a surface that will support a vehicle, but I'm just thinking, if there is access for a vehicle, it should be able to support it.
Right, it's true, yeah, I mean, we get like 2 feet of snow, I mean, and it's not.
Or,
plowed.
or if it's, mud season and,
True. Yeah,
But for what purpose?
exactly, yeah, like I said, I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that if it is there, it ought to be able to support its intended purpose.
yeah.
But
So I
I
can
mean,
see-
I'm just curious, why do we want an emergency vehicle to go right to the water's edge? I don't
What if it
quite
was the
understand
winter
that.
and there was a skating accident? I mean, perhaps the emergency vehicle would want to get right down to the water. I don't
Were
know.
you in the meeting, Wendy, when the fire chief
No.
was here? Oh, you weren't, he was great, I mean, he acted, they've had times when they've gone there, they've experienced what you're saying, and
Mhm.
he felt very confident with, I don't know, with the situation now. I don't know, being able to get to the water, didn't you feel like that? I don't know.
Yeah, and, I was actually the one who raised the concern about, if you close down that road, is that, I raised 2 concerns, one about turning radius, for coming down that hill, if you have to take a kind of a hard left and then go up gradient to get behind the cabin, and then another somewhat acute turn, most fire chiefs I've worked with over the years, they don't want to get to a dead end where they have to then like back out through a big S turn. And so what we talked about is, could you retain kind of, right now, it's a low bearing road, could you kind of retain that, maybe the grass is over, but the foundation of that road doesn't get removed, so that if needed, emergency vehicles go together.
Yeah,
But yeah, I remember Chief Wire was not,
Yeah.
didn't seem to feel that strongly about it.
yeah,
I was on the fire department and you would never bring a pumper or maybe the rescue. I think they would stop at that curve of one in the parking lot and bring down whatever.
Ladders or whatever, yeah.
Equipment they needed aboard. I don't think that's a big deal. In terms of turning a fire engine around, that requires a absolute huge cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And never get it again.
Right, no, I know, but
They're gonna have to back out.
with the loop, the thought was that a truck could loop around.
I mean, how many times is it?
Very rare.
Yeah, I mean, that to me would change the whole appearance of the central site there. I mean, if you had to loop it around, it's not impossible, but it doesn't,
But couldn't you just let the road grow in? I mean, it would still be load bearing, it just, would not,
if they needed to do it,
yeah,
it'd be
So
once
then-
in a blue moon.
yeah.
Hopefully never.
Well, exactly.
But you gotta prepare for the. or
The
you
only
may-
thing that will come down there is rescue. I don't get fire.
Right.
Just like
I think that's right. I think Chief Dwyer said as much, and if the building was on fire,
You just let it burn.
it would. Yeah, because by the time they got there, it would probably be too late.
Yeah.
One thing, Trent, that we were just mentioning here, there's no way that anyone can back a trailer down to put a boat in the water. I mean, everything,
Yeah.
it would be car top boat, a canoe or a kayak, but if you're a lady with a kayak, it'd be nice to be able to unload it at the water's edge and then drive back up to the creek.
Well, you got that secondary parking lot, the closest one, and then a straight shot right to the water.
So what's that straight shot made of?
So this is the same as the all access trail, which will be about 8 feet wide and sort of crushed granite stone. Really hard. Actually, you could drive a car down there, but it'd be an easy path to walk down. But it wouldn't be. So yeah, if you had a canoe or a kayak, it would be a 2-person job. It'd be,
Walk it down and then go back.
to walk it down. Yeah.
Is that like a little dock at the end?
That's existing dock. That's existing.
So I was wondering if there's any way for someone to be able to get a view from it. Everything is so much further away from the water than it is now. Somebody can all access. And if they go down there, then they have to come on back. They just go down and back. There's no place to sort of sit on the grass. Yeah, right.
But you have to get to the grass and there's no accessible path to the grass.
No.
Are you saying like right here? Yeah, I mean, this is sort of not much different than it is now. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's like a flat lawn, but yeah, I guess if you're in a wheelchair, it's harder to wheel on grass. So whether you want to turn that into a hardscape, that would be, yeah. So right now, in terms of accessible, it would be this trail that leads around the pond and, you'd have that viewing corridor at the end of the pond looking back across.
And the benches could go anywhere.
Yeah, the benches could go anywhere. I mean, if you,
Is that a picture of the benches where the grass is darker and not because the grass is cut?
yeah, this is just right here. Actually, would you go to the next slide? This is just something that like I kind of took liberty to do. This is nothing, this is literally get further. So I mean, right now, I mean, does the town cut the grass?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just was, I mean, of course, the town cuts the grass, right?
It's like this, where it's not.
Okay.
It doesn't look like.
It doesn't look like that.
You can consider the bench if you want them.
So just to lower the maintenance, I just did this, but this does not have to be the case, but I just,
Pretty hard surface, so that people could wheel a wheelchair or.
And I think you'd want, isn't that 25%, like, once you have a feature like a picnic table, I believe 25% has to be accessible. Is that right, Brian?
It's all in your program within your park system, elements of it need to be accessible. So this is our dock, your dock needs to be accessible.
That was a project that the Mill Pond Committee was considering, was making each picnic table have a hard surface around it with access from the path. So I think that's, I mean, Ryan came to the Concom to look at permitting that.
Well, I think that it all started with Bicentennial Committee. Right.
well, we could, I think doing all of this part would be too much, but I mean, it would be easy to do some of it and put a picnic table and just.
I think if one of the 4 benches or tables is accessible, I believe, I believe that is the requirement.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be that all 4 would need to be.
and that would be easy enough to do, yeah.
And you might maybe that one would be the one that was closest to what you've already defined as a compliant surface. So that there isn't too much additional hard surface or, wheelchair compliant surface.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Do you have a plan view of the former slide? It's kind of hard to tell what's going on with all the trees. Yeah, that one,
Yeah.
do you have that plan view of the entire project
Okay,
area?
the first one, right, this one,
Well, I'm thinking with a little bit more detail, the same large scale, but in point of view. It's sort of hard to tell, but how the parking lot, meets up with the roadway and how the two parking lots, deal with each other at that corner.
okay, yeah, so this is really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the existing road that is there now. And right now, when you get to here, you can choose to go this way or up. And so this is now no longer, and so you would go up the hill, you would have a parking lot right here. The nice thing about this and what, we talked about in some of the workshops is that the cabin is this sort of jewel of an architecture structure of West Newbury. I mean, it's kind of a symbol, it's beautiful. But when you drive here, you sort of ignore it. And it's way up on this hill, but it's a beautiful space. And when you walk on the porch, you look out over the pond, and right now you're staring at cars. But when these cars go away, you'll be staring at just nature. So when you park here, it kind of forces you in a way to experience the cabin, which you don't really do as much anymore. So you have a choice to park here, or you can keep driving. And we probably have like 2 handicap spaces here, or you could park here. Where really that's the existing parking lot now. So that's how it works.
One of the things that came up when the town kicked off the 113 Pike State traffic study, there was a kickoff meeting with the school, and the lodge came up as this desire for the school to be able to access it and use it. But we lack a circulation system separate from where the cars are to go from the lodge down to that accessible trail. Can we separate a path that goes up to the lodge at a grade less than 4% to make that accessible route and connect the lodge to the actual trail?
What do you think? I think it's pretty steep, right? Like it's up there on the hill.
I think you have plenty of room to do it either way. Take it.
Do a little cutting and filling.
I mean, you're saying maybe like something like this.
I would, if you were to go that far, I would fork it further up on your plans toward the culvert and separate it, or I would bring it straight across and you would try to see how much run you can get by just sort of slowly, gradually looping it up and around the lodge to the entrance on the rear.
Would you mind to, like, your point, just because I'm probably not the only one who has the right time.
Sure.
Thanks.
I mean, the challenge here is if you're in a chair and you park here and you use the lodge to get down here, you're co-mingling with, you're going right at a slope greater than 5%. So then you would have to hop in a car, and you're coming with the traffic, so it's unsafe. So then you would have to hop in a car and park here and then go out. So one way to make the lodge accessible would be to bring this path through here and then up and around, perhaps like that, or you fork it over here and bring it up that way. I didn't look at the grading, but it's a simple grading exercise. But I think it's important to not only people in chairs, but also people on bikes or horseback or whatever, to not be commingled with the cars and the parking.
It's from just my experience of being out there, it does feel pretty, it is steep right there. So I think in my mind, and we actually talked about this in that town meeting, the parking lot that we put, down here. was really, that's the all access parking lot. Yeah, 'cause I mean, you couldn't park, and I mean, that'd be super uncomfortable.
I mean, anybody coming down that dirt road, which is bumpy, it's rutted, it's eroded, you're not gonna have a problem getting from that upper lot to the lower one. I mean, I don't see that as a huge issue. The only question I have is why so much parking? I never really see more cars down there than 4 or 5 at most. I mean, there is winter carnival, but that, you know, you would manage parking, you probably have people park above.
Well, there are social events there. The Riders
Yeah.
Club holds the party when we get 80 people.
You wouldn't bring horse trailers down.
No,
Yeah.
no, they don't go further than the lower field. But, the Republicans have had parties there. There've been, you know, a number of occasions over the years that, and when we have a Milpon meeting, there might be 6 or 8 cars in the back.
And don't forget, right now, we have several cars on the road along the pond, which will no longer be there. They'll have to be up in the lot.
John, what do you think is an adequate parking volume?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't think we've done a traffic study. But I didn't see on the wish list on the earlier slides, lots of parking. I didn't see that. Well, I mean, you've got parking there for that awful lot.
Yeah.
You put those 7 cars and I guess lower ones, about a half dozen. So you've got room for a dozen plus cars.
But if you're gonna make it so much nicer, it's gonna attract more to the go. So then.
I don't think there's a right along inside. I think it's a very,
Go right around the.
very interesting.
We can walk up in the back already though. When we have our meal, yeah.
That's why I suppose that was where the parking lot was moved. I'm delighted to see that you did that.
From a site work standpoint, because I know behind is kind of dropped off on it, how comfortable are you being able to put that in spots?
Yeah, it works pretty well without designing a retaining wall and stuff. I mean, I'd have to look at the plan and see how much space, but it works. It's not that hard. The construction doesn't seem, I mean, this whole design is actually not, really difficult, which is nice. The hardest part of the construction of this will be the erosion control and the trail construction, making it wide and dry. And, that's gonna be when we hire the engineering company to come out and look at it. They're companies that specialize in all access trails. And, so that's gonna be where the expense comes in. These parking lots aren't gonna be that difficult to build.
It looks like probably the one biggest tree in the back of the, plant building, would be at the far end of it.
And I think I remember the fire chief, but if I looked at it, I haven't looked at it in a little bit, but I don't remember many trees. I don't think any trees are gonna have to come out. This isn't like a big, because you already have a pretty wide road there. So I just had to kind of bump out about 20 feet, and I don't remember, I might take on one tree or something, but nothing major.
Is there any conflict with the septic tank, isn't there, just, next to the roadway?
There is a septic tank, and we haven't been able to find the as-built for that, but once we hear from y'all that, like, you approve this and you're ready to go, then we're gonna like get down and get those details all worked out, but we need to figure out if like the septic can bear the load of cars. But we're hopeful.
And yeah, just that question did come up at, actually it came up at the CPC discussion, and it came up at the staff discussion too. So I did have Paul Savigny take a look at that, and his advice was that, let's see, several years back, tank was located, a riser and manifold cover were installed at grade. The exact location or size of the leaching area is unknown. Basically, he's saying system was a stone pipe system, which can typically handle the weight of vehicles if designed for such. If not, modifications to the existing septic may be needed for vehicular traffic. He would anticipate a cost of under $1,000 to inspect, locate, and field stake the existing septic components. So I met with Paul about 2 weeks ago and asked him to produce this or to produce whatever his advice was. And I said, be sure to be clear, like if the town wanted to go past the conceptual stage or to, drill down on like constructability or feasibility, what would we do? And that was his advice, is to have it inspected, located, and field staked, and determine whether, what the load bearing is and if that would potentially need to be redone. So for under $1,000, you could get a handle on that.
Hi, yeah, so, I'm Tricia Reese with the Open Space Committee, and the original CPC application for the town meeting voted this funding was for an all-access trail at Mill Pond. And I think that we really lost sight of what the town voted this project at this stage to include. And we wanted, access clearly, for the lodge, which I think we have, and we mentioned that. We thought maybe we increase or improve the handicap parking, and certainly access to the dock, to viewing positions, and to picnic tables. And I'm seeing a lot of parking lot improvements, which I think are way beyond the scope of what this particular project envisioned. And I also, and I'm not sure where this came from, but I'm looking at this drawing, which I'm not seeing in the slides yet, but it's a phase 1 Mill Pond all access project, which includes this revised road and parking area, but in fact does not include access trail to the far reach on the shore. Where we were really coming from is to enable people to be in the woodlands, on a trail, on a path, which is something we've been talking about, as you correctly pointed out, since 1996, and I'm not seeing anything like that.
Okay, let's go back to that first slide where it shows the whole big picture. So starting, ignore the parking lot. This trail. That's coming from me. Oh, it's rebooting. Okay,
The computer's fine, so it just, I think it's the screen.
okay.
I think you get that line right there. Just that down a little bit.
There.
Okay.
Can you enlarge that?
Do that.
Yeah.
So she doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Reach.
So, yeah, essentially this trail that goes all the way around here, that was sort of the jurisdiction of where it, I was told we want to have the all access trail. And essentially an all access trail can be whatever you want it to, but essentially it's about 6 to 8 feet wide and has a hard path that a wheelchair can go on. I mean, maybe go back to the slide, Angus, that shows the sort of those pictures of what that would be. So, like, I mean, even wider, go back to that, even wider than that, but essentially it looks like that. So that is the design, like that's what we want to do. That's what we're proposing. I mean, the next step would be to draw a detail of what the material you're going to use, how you're going to build it. And that we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but certainly, what if the town votes on this and approves of that and we go to that level of detail, then if you can get the construction cost on this and you can say, we don't want to do the parking lots right now. That's phase 2. We'll do that in 15 years. Like, let's focus on the all access trail only and go ahead and construct that. That's a pretty decent project. Let's make that the priority. That's fine. I mean,
But why am I seeing this phase 1 goal is showing the parking and not the trail?
That was actually part of the Open Space Committee application to CPC. And I think Brad created that. Is that right, Brad?
Brad, did you create this?
Yeah, you did, I signed it.
That's the presentation I created.
But why are we talking about a phase 1 that doesn't include the trail and only parking? I guess I just want to be clear here that parking wasn't part of the breach of the $30,000 in planning here. It was Mill Pond access trail. So I just hoping to bring this sort of back to where it was supposed to
This
be.
was really.
It's a much less master bridge sort of thing.
okay.
I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying that you know, it looks very grand, and very expensive, and very long term, and we had a very modest trail.
Right.
If I can just say something quick, Patricia, it strikes me that to get to the trail, you need something that also meets the accessibility requirements, and what's there currently probably doesn't. And so if you build a trail and it's an island, and the people that you've upgraded the trail for their intended use can't get to it now, then what was the point of making the trail?
You have car access and you have handicap spots, which may be inadequate now, but presumably they would be made adequate. And trails to the dock, and trails to the picnic table, trails to viewing, seats along the trail, and I'm not seeing any of that.
It seems to be that lower parking lot, at least at the outset, would be sufficient to satisfy the demand. And that connects directly to the trail. That's sort of my gut feel.
Yeah, I think the only other areas of opportunity that hasn't been shown is the dog waiting area. So if you're in a chair and you want to throw your stick for your dog, you don't have access to the waterfront. And then I think it's kind of unresolved what happens when you get to the end. Is it just a bench? You can turn around. What does that plan look like?
Do you have water going that way in your presentation tonight?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
I have a question that to me is, we were talking about the beauty and the fact that people on this trail would be in nature was the whole thing.
Mhm.
And what I noticed is if you could go out and run, I don't know if it's that one or the next one, it shows how that extends. But even that's fine. So it looks like all the trees are gone that now kind of are somewhat adjacent to the trail. So what I see thinking about today is the heat, the fact that there's no shade on the trail for people in a wheelchair. And they also aren't getting any of the birds and the things that happen when you have trees a little closer. It looks like most of the trees that have had to be removed are also just not right. But when
I
it
think
goes
you
there,
only included the trees above a certain. So it's not, because there's not, I don't think you're showing.
It's just a
Well, actually, there really aren't many trees right here.
I'm just thinking about the exposure of it, that it's so exposed if it rains or, sun or whatever.
as I recall, when Greg Hockman presented the wetlands plan, which I don't know if you've got any access to, they had mapped every single tree.
Yeah, we do.
And
We
this
do,
is actually pretty real with everything.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So that's actually the tree cover.
I mean, it's another 50 feet that you walk and the shade moves,
Yeah, whereas, I just don't, when I'm looking at the picture, we actually photographed the one that has the multi pictures and the one walking the steps over to one side. It's
Yeah,
just board
yeah.
and there's just water and everything. But when you're on the trail this way, it looks like you see a lot of lawn to the water, but then you're just kind of out there.
Marlon, would you like to see additional tree plantings between the parking lot?
I didn't know what was required. I mean, I'm sure that it's considered expense. I thought it was a rather than
We got a very active tree committee.
What is the sort of a triangle there before you go around? It looked like it was, up on the, yes. So what is that?
Those are just the trails that go off. Those would not be all access, the ones that sort of.
Go to the back one? That's what I was asking.
the horse and dog waiting area is probably at the.
It would be good to do the main all access trail in a different color.
Yeah,
that's what I'm-
So it creates more
Yeah,
activity.
I'm sorry.
I actually think the trail that leads to the hayfield, stop with this Patricia likes to call it. I actually think that's a fully accessible and a really good example of an all access trail in town. It's good drainage, except for that lower section.
Yeah, I like the way it looks there.
Isn't a section of that pretty steep?
I think it goes above 5%. I've been out to school, but
Is there anybody that would like to comment from the, that's zooming in?
Wendy, Jessica, Carol?
No, my one question, I couldn't kind of hear it was, is the all access path going to go over or around the current path that's there that we walk, ride and jog on? Because I can't see that being a combined path.
Yeah, so the all access path is where the existing path is now. It's just improved. It's just-
Okay, so when you ride a horse over that, it won't damage it.
No, it should.
Could it come to the balloon path or reprocess the?
And it's gonna be it might be multiple things. I mean, there might be, the biggest thing is, it's really wet. This is very, very wet right here. And so is that over there. So there's gonna be some buildup maybe. There's gonna be different ways to construct it. There might have to be people talk about boardwalks. But again, like, I didn't get to that level because I didn't feel, we wanted, you know, to get buy-in from this concept first before we went into the level of how this actual path is going to be constructed. But the erosion is
Let everything let.
this part.
Put down there.
could be wet.
No.
Yeah. Let them pass.
1.9 now. I mean, Richard's point, I think, was that the trail is the centerpiece of this project, and then you provide parking for it. It's like when we, or Greenbelt acquires land, we have trailheads, and we use it 2 or 3 spots. I mean, you know, sometimes that's maxes out the space that we have to play with. But I'm just curious why it didn't go all the way up to the dam. I think what we envisioned was from the dam, you pretty much got the other end, so the 2/3 of the trail that we envisioned is here. But the west end just sort of disappeared.
Which side? You mean over here?
West end, I guess, going up toward 113, to the left of that lower parking lot. There's a little dam right there.
Oh, that thing.
Yeah,
So why is there not like trail there?
well, up to that point, we don't want the trail to go to the dam.
Right.
That's. sort of
You mean
down
where the
there.
current road is,
Yeah.
John?
What's that?
You mean where the current road is? You wanted that trail to continue?
Yeah, so pretty much
Yeah.
close to the road, and of course that road's not gonna be there anymore.
Right.
But it could be a train.
Well, this road.
Yeah, it is. The road's gonna be, have to have that.
Yeah, this road is the existing road and it'll stay the same.
But continue now along the trail, down to those dots. From the bottom of that leftmost arrow. Okay, here, yeah, follow the edge of the pond.
If that's what, yeah, that's what everybody wants.
Yeah, that was, did we talk about that 15 minutes ago, about the trail along through that area?
And along the water. Yeah, I'm closer to the water.
Yeah, well, the road's fairly, I mean, was it 25 feet or so from the water at the park?
I just had one thought. Okay, get to what's the, like, if we're trying to make it sort of, this is sort of the centerpiece and the attractive end point. We have a couple of benches there, but I'd like to see what anyone's thoughts are, like, okay, you get there and, okay, and then just turn around. What's gonna be is there gonna be a reason to walk all the way there?
Yeah, so I would say yes. Not only is it a beautiful viewing point, but you could even think about now or in the future having a shelter, a modest shelter. And if you got all the way around, there would be a place for refuge. You might even with Concom's approval have a viewing platform of some kind that would extend out maybe into the pond. And they make those, yeah, wildlife viewing. And they make those accessible. I mean, I wondered if you looked at some of Mass Audubon's new trails, which they call their all persons trail. They don't just, they're not just wider and fine paths, but they also have amenities along the way. Viewing platforms, seating areas. They may have interpretive signage that might be in Braille. Or they might have audio cues with a QR code or something like that. And, you know, I was hoping that maybe we'd get some ideas from you on, and how the trail could be advanced for all persons in ways other than just
Right, right. And those are all possible. And those are, I mean, I have seen what you're talking about, and we talked a lot about that in those workshops we had, and there are tons of ideas like that. It's just, I mean, no matter if that's what you want, and, you know,
But
go
for all
into the
of us, I
money.
mean, this is iteration one. I mean,
Right.
let's get the trail in place before we have, audio and shelters and that's sort of.
But to Marvin's point about wishing that there was more shade between the parking area and where the trees start, maybe there is a covered shelter over a couple of those picnic tables down by the water's edge, further down.
That's what I think the lodge, why the lodge is so great in weaving it into the entire site, because you have the deep, the deep porches. And on the north side of the lodge, you have the tall tree canopy, and I can see that as being a nice spot for a wayside and benches looking out over the dam. And all the ash trees that are dying and those kinds. But that's part of, when I think about my father, who doesn't walk, and he's well ready to the pond either, like if we were to go to the pond, we would hang out at the lodge. That's where we would bring him, and we would be on the deck overlooking the pond, and he would watch the kids and whatever. Or either in the winter time, we could watch them skate. But that's why I think that connection is really important, because it is nice, and it is refuge, and it does have great prospects.
I think the vistas, I'm sort of against putting more trees, that the whole, this is one of the few places where we have vistas. There's plenty of trees everywhere else in the area, around the lodge and stuff, like adding more trees to, you're on the trail so you can look out over the water rather than blocking it.
Yeah, one of the things we said was we wanted this to remain wild and natural. So putting in.
So we're trying to make it Augusta National, and
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't.
there's a lot, everyone wants a road here and a paved here and more, but that goes against everything all the people said. We want to keep it natural, and everyone's wanted to add more macadam and more trails, and no.
I mean, it's too bad we don't have somebody who walks and uses a walker or uses a wheelchair. My hunch is, and I would like to see the trail extended this way. But that's gonna be exhausting for many elderly to go all the way out there. I mean, I'll go out and walk it again. Did you get a distance from that parking lot to the furthest stopping point?
I think it's probably about 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
That's just going up.
From here to here,
How far do you think?
I think it's about, if I remember, it's
I don't think it's
about 10 minutes. probably.
It's more than.
Measure it.
It's what?
You could measure it on.
I mean, that would be exhausting. for a lot
my computer.
Right, no, I agree. Longer, and they would be, they might walk here.
That seems long.
Yeah, if you look on the websites, most all access trails are less than a mile, so this would be roughly the ballpark. I was
Right.
at for single all accessible.
So I know the design of the trail is that is, future discussion, but to me, having a 6 to 8 foot wide packed trail does not seem in keeping with the natural landscape. So that's just one comment out. I don't know if we could do both, have it still seem to be part of the landscape and, accessible and not so wide.
Not so wide,
Yeah.
yeah,
5 or 6 feet.
like 6
I mean, that
feet
feels
would
like
be-
a road. We're just putting a road.
Yeah, like a road is, God, the width of a road is what is the width of a road? 18, okay, 18, right, and a wide sidewalk is about 8. Oh, wide path is 8.
And how wide do you think the path is?
And then, so, I mean, I would say in all access, I mean, most all access trails are about 6 to 8. With 4 is very narrow. You wouldn't want to go 4 feet. But going back to that one image of that older woman walking down the path, I mean, it would simply look like that or no more. But again, like, because we want it, in some places, there might have to be boardwalk, or we might have to do something, like that to keep it dry, because it does, but essentially it would be like that. That's probably about 6 feet. What that woman is walking on, maybe a little, but that's, and this is just for this one section. You know, so when you leave, it's not gonna be,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Trent, and how would you deal with, as you get into the wind section, one of the great hazards are the tree roots.
right,
So does that mean that that would probably have to be boardwalk?
not necessarily, it would have to be kind of built up around the tree roots, and it can be done, and the trees can survive, but, I mean, that'll have to just sort of be dealt with, like, it can work, it can be done, but it's gonna have to be done sensitively.
Yeah, but would the Concom allow, that material, to be put in so close to the water?
Yes, I think we have to meet with Michelle, we've met with her throughout this process, and she knows we're doing this, and she hasn't had an objection to it yet, these are just things. But yeah, I think, really we're taking the existing trail, which is super narrow and, small, we're just saying we want to improve it. And usually Concom is open to that.
And I know there was an Andrew done. What exactly is the status of the proposal and permit?
Just, we're.
Just
not-
the
Yeah,
hammer, that's it. And that was all that was in the scope for Williams Strategies. Just to kind of make sure that we had good information about the resource delivery.
Okay, I think we're getting to the point where we've got a lot of ideas. Where do we go from here?
She's got 87 slides, I counted.
Yeah,
That was the whole, I included the board's packet, the
Oh,
initial.
The dredging of Mill Pond and every conceivable document that had the word Mill Pond.
Yeah, I was giving all the back.
Okay.
So is there more feedback that you need, Trent? Or anything that we didn't touch on?
I mean, I think, Archie's heading in the right direction. I mean, it's up to y'all, like, where we go from here and what you want me to do. And I mean, I can take your feedback that you said tonight, that Angus has written down, and I don't know, I just love for y'all to talk amongst yourselves and sort of summarize, like, what are you thinking? Like, what,
One thing that comes to mind for me, so as I think people know, when the initial proposal came into CPC, it was initially double the proposed budget with the hope that the town would get the Mass Trails grant and that half would be funded by Mass Trail, and half would be funded by CPC. When the Mass Trails grant didn't come through, CPC kind of retooled the scope a bit to say, okay, what can we do with half the initial proposed budget? So I think part of the intent of this work is to make the town competitive for future non-local funding, Mass Trails grants, et cetera. So that only, in order to do that, you need a concept that people support, because you don't want to get grant funding for something that people don't want. So that, I think, is part of the goal tonight is this idea or something like this, taking into account the feedback that's been received, is that in the ballpark of what people want to see the town pursue on some time frame, not necessarily a short-term time frame, but it sounds like definitely people are more, it sounds like people are more favorable toward making the trail itself that's there now more accessible. And that it sounds like that's what people feel ought to be a near-term priority relative to potentially a more of a transformative vision of reconfiguring parking. But I also, I do think of part of what the parking came from is some of the ideas were, some of the groups were suggesting more programmed activities, more formalized uses of, whether that's school classrooms or different organized activities, which does rely on some amount of parking. But
so I think that it sounds like the big question is, you know, you can kind of, there's two things, there's parking, the parking lots, and then there's the trail. And do you know, it seems like to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, like, if we move forward with this, could we move forward with this and get an idea of what is the cost and what is, you know, what does it mean for construction? And, you know, you could just do the, after you find out all that information, you could just focus, maybe it's not as expensive as you think, you could do both, or you could just do the trail. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could move forward with the plans, and then you could phase the construction. But if we could go back real quick to the observation slide, I just want to kind of remind people why we kind of did, I guess, move towards parking a little bit. And I have a better photograph actually. But we've talked a lot about the cabin, how great the cabin is, and you know, we talked about if your elderly parents come and where would you put them, and you know, on a hot day, you might want to sit them on the porch so they could watch the kids play. Like, you know, if you're up here on the cabin and you're looking down, and unfortunately I have a much better picture of but essentially you're usually staring at cars.
I think everybody agrees.
Okay.
That eliminating the parking by the water's edge is a priority.
Right.
And the other priority that we haven't touched on is the dike at the southern end of the pond, getting to that piney spot. It needs to be addressed probably this year. It's
Right.
narrower
Yeah.
and narrower,
Yeah.
and you can't, you know, to walk a horse across it is scary. If there are kids fishing on the dike, you can't walk behind them. So that's irrespective of what else we do, that needs to be addressed.
Right. So yeah, so there's the parking, and as long as this road stays here, it's really hard. I mean, you have your no parking signs, but it's too easy to park right there. So you have, so there's the parking decision, and then there's the all access decision. It sounds like the all access decision is like already made. Everyone wants that. There's just, I guess the decision then becomes, do we also do the parking? And I guess what I'm saying is, you could just move forward with the plan, like, and see what the cost is, and then shelve the parking if it's too expensive, and focus on the trail. Could just, you know, that decision could be made when you have more information. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I just add that you can't not do the dock and the benches and picnic tables too. It's kind of disrespectful to those with disabilities. We've got this great pathway, but there's no real place for you. You can't use that space. That's not very equitable. I know the path is the goal, but those amenities are just as important for the user group.
Tricia.
Yeah, I guess the goal, I would think, would be to get what we need to apply for the next round of Mass Trails funding. And I just read today that the 2023 grant round opens in November this year. So if we decide on scope of at least maybe a phase one of this project, I would like to see that scope be capable of knowing how much it costs to put in the trail, include parking, the access that Brad's talking about. And I believe that we still have funds left over from the 30,000,
That's right.
around 13,000.
Yeah, those numbers I sent you a few months or so ago are correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so, that's what I'd like to see this go next, is to put it in a position, to file for that third-party grant, to make the trail part of it, and the accessibility part of it, eligible for the Mass Trails application.
11,000 is what.
Letters.
Yeah.
Does Mass Trail give an explanation for denial, or do they just give a flat denial?
I think they saw you're applying next year.
I think in this case, they favor more construction over and trail creation, design and plan.
It would seem we would go in with more credibility to put them much further down the path now. And we spent town money showing we're committed to this project, so maybe that would carry some weight.
When we decided who's running the show, which town entity.
That's the next bone of contention.
Who wants it? I mean, we all like it. Mill Pond, you know, we don't do much. But, I mean, Robin and I are here, we're willing to, you know, tackle some of it. It is sort of our bailiwick.
It does need a leader.
It doesn't need a leader.
It was an open space.
It was open space, it shouldn't, it shouldn't be open. Yeah.
Joint venture.
A joint venture. For all three, park and rec, open space and middle fund.
Yeah.
Somebody in charge for that.
You know, if you all heard how many people call me complaining about baseball diamonds. Yeah, stuff like that. There's that. I think the question is really for the select board. You guys know what is in the work plan of various department heads and you need to provide if constituents guidance on where the town wants to take this.
Well, we know that this becomes an additional workload for town staff. That's the issue. It's a lot of man hours involved in getting to this point. So someone besides Angus and Wayne have to drive the truck.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think that you guys get so much on your plate, it's, you don't need this. I mean, I think it's somebody from Park and Rec, open space, and Mill Pond. And then Amy,
So out of this first scope of work here, the end product is a conceptual design, correct?
Yeah, that's, so this is pretty much draws exactly from the agreed scope.
Oh, okay, so construction costs and permitting research is part of it.
Correct, yeah,
Okay,
so
great.
basically.
That will be part of it. Okay.
So-
all right, okay.
So when we say research construction cost and permitting, it's not like construction documents like that.
No, we get that. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And so like a construction company would be able to give you maybe an estimate with these concept plans, but it's gonna be a rough estimate.
yeah.
That's okay.
You're not gonna know.
But that 11,000 balance you talked about, that would go to pay for that part of it.
It's actually within the scope. I mean, we
Yeah,
can.
yeah, I
we
think
can talk
research
where
and
you are
construction
without
costs,
it.
that's fine,
Yeah,
but it'll be an estimate
yeah,
in the permitting, that's not that hard. And then after I'm done, after step 5 is done, then it'll be hiring. I mean, then do you apply for the grant and then you hire someone to do construction documents?
Depends on the grant.
Yeah,
If you want those funds to count forward,
for your math.
that's, you gotta do it during grant. Phase. And it depends on how much, what stage you want to take it, take it to construction.
well, we would do, I think once we research construction, we'll have a better idea. I mean, some of these companies, like, you know, you were talking about, like, this is what they do, so they might not need some detailed construction documents, you know, so I think, I mean, after we do a little research on how.
I think it's typical detail. There may be some fuzzy detailing around the wet area, the existing gate, the trail kiosk, and then the dock. But detailing is so.
Yeah.
I think the other area that's gonna be a little tricky to figure out is the, once you're around the corner to get to that, south point, you know, going up the hill, the Ruby area you were talking about, and that's gonna take a fair amount of time.
And if you do want to build, repair the culvert into this project, that's gonna be another thing.
Brad, how much will the 50% construction drawings? Will be our initial estimate?
Wayne's a new person, could be
I don't know. I mean, just to throw numbers out there.
You hear me?
It's like
I just-
$250,000
yeah.
project. It's-
Yeah.
Like there are other.
It's just throwing numbers at the wall.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah.
Um,
Started yet. So, but I think, Archie was just saying, could the, you know, the newly budgeted DPW projects, programs manager, help manage a project like this? The answer is definitely yes. There's other projects in the backlog, like the paid school study that like haven't even moved forward because there's no bandwidth to do that. So we have, I mean, that person's got 6 months of work the day they start doing here, and we've gotten very few applicants. But I see a project like this, I see a lot of the time impact is what I'll call shuttle diplomacy, which is basically someone among the really the 4 primary, I mean, the public as a whole, but really the committees to kind of shop around. Is this a good idea? Do you like, you know, that's what takes the time, one of those meetings, some of those conversations. That's all very enjoyable stuff, but it does take time. So I think if a committee or a, maybe, let's say each committee, each of the 3 kind of major committees has a designee, they can meet. That's not a quorum because they're not an official, you know, and they can actually do things between meetings and keep things moving. That's, you know, I think if the town is clear on kind of the direction it's going, the project management aspects are a lot less. Part of why things, anything to do with my Mill Pond or Pipe State is kind of fraught is that there are so many ideas that to get to that point of what are we trying to do can take an enormous amount of time. And so I think that's great.
One, yeah, and to Andy's point, we actually haven't even mentioned Greenbelt's
That's right.
role
That's right.
in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Actually, you've got a letter in this, in the initial CPC application that came up, and we have a letter from Dave Rimmer, who, when we were talking only about, of course, the all access trail, said that there was nothing in the CR that would be, you know, that would say against building.
Oh, it said nothing, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a letter in the CPC application. But
It's
we're-
about slide 72-ish.
Right. But we're talking about just the all access trail, nothing, you know.
The big challenge with the CR is time to control parking, so there are creative ways to install big boulders, you could slope landform up, so they're part of the landscape versus being a fence. Like the precedent in which Trent showed, I don't think that would fly in the CR, I don't think we have fences like that except for rings.
So, why don't the 3 committees see if they can get a volunteer from each committee to commit to being sort of a subcommittee that can just get a consensus?
Working group.
Okay,
We've
working
got a
group.
subcommittee. It's
Okay,
gotta-
yeah, not a committee, okay.
It's gotta post checks. And Brad, you know, because you did the work for the initial Mass Trails grant, you have a good idea of what they're gonna be looking for. What should the town be prioritizing between now and the November deadline to be competitive?
I think they really want to build stuff. I think that's particularly, project like this.
But things can't get, you know, kind of shovel ready until they're permitted, they can't get permitted, so
It's not
fully
a-
designs. Do you think it should be to advance a conceptual plan to more of a fully engineered?
So generally speaking, if we had applied to the last Mass Trails round, we would have learned about a few weeks ago that yes, we received it. Then you have your contract in hands around Labor Day. So then you would have to really hustle and get through permitting in the fall, which we are in a good shape. Because we've got the NRED, we've got concept that things aren't moving around too much. It should be able to be permitted by the end of the year. It's a fairly straightforward project. It's restorative.
So they're not looking for applications to be fully permitted at the time?
No.
Okay.
But they want to see documentation that you have gotten estimates and you have an idea how much it will cost and maybe some documents that show there is some permitting already. And they want to see that stuff.
that everybody's working together and everybody's supportive. You know, I think one of the question marks that a reviewer could look at it is what's the status of CPC and or where the match is coming from and all those funds committed. You just secure them in the fall. In which case, how much did you secure? But generally speaking, if you get it permitted by year's end, then you get it out the bid. That takes about 8 weeks to go from putting it on the street to having somebody in the contract. And spring mobilization, you just have to be done by June 30th. And there's no long lead items here. It's not like you're sourcing fancy picnic tables from Spain.
But for an application that would be submitted in November, the completion date wouldn't be this coming June 30th.
No,
No, it'd be like the following.
it would be FY 24
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
because active grants right now would have to be done by June 30th.
Yeah.
2023.
Oh,
And one of the grant awards,
You would have found out if we had applied for the most recent round, we would have found out 2 weeks ago.
But in November,
I think that they're due like around February, and then you kind of start hearing where it trickles out May, June. They like,
so you have roughly one full fiscal year to get everything done.
depending on how quickly the executive offices are able to get the ear of the governor, and the governor's able to approve it all. Sometimes it goes faster, sometimes it goes slower. Then we will we have a new governor by this staffing, so.
there will be a new governor.
But the old governor really likes this program, or the current governor really likes this program and has funded it robustly. So that pattern we anticipate continuing.
Is there a dedicated grant writer or is it just each?
And I can volunteer my time just because. But that's just write it.
So it seems like the next step is for this working group to get established, because nothing's gonna move forward until that happens, right?
well, I did the next step, to get a new concept drawing.
Well, I'm after Trent completes her work, yeah. I mean, the next step moving forward in the project.
Right.
We need to. put working group.
Yeah, Patricia's, that's a really important point, and also it's really important that it's not just this meeting. I mean, you each represent different committees. This, I think, Trent, once you have an updated, drawing, I think that will go to each of the committees probably, just to make sure everyone's gets to see it and touch it and ask questions. Not with you, that's outside of your scope, but I think that it's going to take some amount of time, maybe between now and the end of the summer, hopefully, that everyone who wants to have a say in it. So for instance, like Ryan Goodwin's up in Maine, he's going to want to, have his 2 cents and so forth. So we'll need to allow some amount of time for that. But I think that's part of the idea of kind of a working group, is that you each are taking the temperature of your respective committees to hopefully arrive at something that people agree on.
And Trent, how long do you think it'll be before we see something, back from you?
Well, so I'm happy to do a new drawing. I guess I just need to know what you want in the new drawing. I have your ideas written down but I'm not, I mean, I guess I'm not clear, do you want the parking lot gone? This existing one staying the same? Will we just to focus on the trail? A new drawing of the trail will look. I mean, do you want more detail of what, I can't say in some places whether this is gonna be boardwalk or crushed gravel. So if y'all could tell me like what you want,
I think we've given her too much information. If I was her, and I'm like, we've gotten like a Y in the trail, we want a trail, more trail down on the northern end of there's just been too many comments, and she doesn't know which one to pick and choose, and I understand that. Everyone can't have everything they want. Let's just say that right off the bat.
Two overriding themes I heard, and I'm biased by my own point of view, is the longer trail up toward the dam and less parking.
Unless,
Parking.
Okay, so do we want to, are we agreed that the parking, the sort of the way the parking is now gets greened over, correct? Or
Right.
down by the water?
I think we need improvements in the lower parking lot that make them accessible. But I don't think we need new.
Clearly more accessible
Yeah.
spaces only.
and you can keep parking on the grass on the other side of the
No,
road.
I think the design guidance trying to be is how many apartment spaces down one.
Yeah, okay, let's make a decision.
How many, Trent, in the configuration that you envisioned tonight, in the lower lot, you know, there are two lots in this view right now, one by the cabin, the other one down lower, and to the south, actually, south and west. How many spaces are on that lower lot?
I think it was about 10.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I-
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Well, it was partly shaded by trees, so I couldn't really tell.
Five on each side.
I think it's about, how many do you have there now? I think it's like 3 or 4 extra
Yeah.
than what you have now. I remember
So,
extending.
I guess where I was going with this is, you know, I think we should look at the site personally. I think the site should be looked at holistically. So we should be looking at what are the parking requirements long-term and what are the trail. I mean, ultimately, we're looking for a trail, but there's other stuff that has to feed the trail. And so maybe we can't do it all at the outset, but it seems to me that we should define one parking lot and the trail. And I mean, there's a mess of other stuff that has to be dealt with. You know, how do we deal with an existing road that people park illegally along and do whatever they want? We could just turn our head and pretend it is part of the current problem.
It is a problem, though.
But I don't deny it, okay, but we've already said, well, we don't, you know, somebody said that, well, why are we so focused on parking? Well, parking and the road all fit together, so if you're gonna, you can't change one without changing the other.
Well, you could have the lower parking lot, I mean, 10 spaces, how long is that gonna be built? I mean, even with the events. And-
John, I know I've been down there when there've been 10 cars.
Oh, I
I've
can
probably
think of,
driven down there only 2 times in my life, and I had trouble finding places to park.
Problem is, if you don't park it, have enough parking, people will start parking. for all
Right,
spaces.
yeah.
I mean, you've still got 10 spaces and you could leave room for additional parking, iteration 2, at the, you know, behind the
Well,
building.
yeah, that was my point, is like, let's figure out, so what do we do now? And then let's have sort of a concept of what we might do later, and we'll focus on the details and actually build on that later.
Well, and remember, that lower parking is really for accessible, it's for handicap.
Yep.
Most people can park up in the parking on the lower field,
Yeah,
they don't
I-
need to
I
come
agree.
down here. So, or if they have to, they can park on the grass behind the mill pond building, maybe we have signs up there that say, you know, parking permitted on grass. But, I don't think we need more than 5 parking places in that stretch there.
I agree.
Yeah, again, I have to go back to the brief. You know, the point of this project was accessibility. And I think that the parking solutions that Winston talked about are good ones, but they're just outside the scope of this particular limited project.
But you need a handicap accessible space.
No question, it's all about accessibility, Brad, and to all the amenities that are there. But solving the general circulation at this particular location, I think is outside the scope of this particular project.
Disagree.
Trent, what we just said, is that
Yeah, so
give you a little bit of more focus?
yeah, so what I'm hearing is, we're gonna remove the road along the pond, but we're gonna replace it with a trail.
Yes,
We're going to remove the parking lot behind the cabin. There can be flexible parking there if needed, but we'll keep the new parking lot. I mean, it's not new, it's actually the same. And we might upgrade it a little bit, so it's not so ill-defined with better signage, et cetera. And we can talk about number of spaces, I mean, that, yeah, so that, I don't know who makes that decision, but someone will decide on that number of spaces, and then,
Just challenge with parking and sorry. Labor this, I know it's gonna be a big deal for conservation commission, road along the water. All that damage, that they will expect that.
I think, yeah, we have to, numbers matter.
The numbers
So-
matter, but the reason I'm kind of smiling is that we have a 1982 parking regulations. They're really out of date. They don't specify any like number of spaces per thousand or anything like most towns do. And what Leah tells me is that typically it's going to be up to the building inspector to determine how much parking is needed. That's why I'm kind of smiling, like we could spend all day talking about it. The two questions I have are, is this a project that needs planning board review? In any other town I've worked in, I would say no, but in this town, I believe the planning board will assert that they will require review. Under what authority, I don't know, but I think they will. And I think they will look to the building inspector to advise them as to how many spaces are needed. I don't know that, but that's the sense. And we talked a little bit about that when we met with the department heads. And it was kind of acknowledged that, you know, Sam said, like, in terms of parking, it's, you know, it's not really a precedental use, like what would he look into? He's gonna probably want to hear from the community as to how many spaces are needed. I do remember him saying he's not gonna hold it to like a Thanksgiving weekend, you know, like retail establishments need to accommodate the most potential parking they might ever need. He's not gonna look at it that way. But if the intent is to have the space, you know, more actively programmed for events or things, he is going to take that into account and advising how much parking he thinks is needed.
Well, how does Greenbelt
Paint
determine
paradise
the
and,
parking spots?
What's
I don't know how he determines.
I mean, the point of this is that trail, so is it really increasing the use of the facility?
I don't think there's anything that's shown here that
Yeah.
increases the use of the
Yeah, I think the
facility.
programming aspect, that's long-term planning for the pond complex, that's not necessarily part of this project, so maybe we need to add.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
so how many parking spaces are there now on that little parking?
I
area?
think 3+, maybe, I mean, it's not,
So you technically could have.
No,
I think it's like 5, I was just down there.
in the
today,
lower,
And there was right there.
So that's the only designated parking right there,
on the right-hand side.
right?
Yeah.
I would never park there. I would never park at that spot because it is so mucky. And so I park on high.
Right, but in that lower spot, how many cars could be accommodated? I don't think it's much more than what's shown, because if,
Like,
Yeah, you can see like one or two more cars maybe.
yeah, because you're going around the corner. so there's
Yeah,
not-
well, that's part of the whole haphazard parking.
Yeah.
So technically, there's 5 designated parking spaces now, so that's all we have to have. That's all that has to be there. Although there could possibly be more, but right now there's only 5.
I'd say the greatest parking demand is the winter time, the nicest thing.
I know, but the point of this project is the trail, though. So I think we really need to focus on the trail and what kind of parking improvements need to be made to accommodate the accessible trail. I mean, all this other stuff is great and it's part of the Mill Pond long range planning. But it's not really within the scope of what we're doing right now.
I read a sample where we had just looked at the CR for the former Hucknagel property, and Greenbelt agreed that it would be a space and maybe parking space for 45 cars.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering how they determine how many spaces are needed.
I would think if you're not reconfiguring existing parking and all you're doing is improving the accessibility of existing trails or amenities such as the dock, I honestly don't see a trigger for planning board review. I really don't. They probably would disagree with me, but I just don't see that in any other town I've ever worked in. Why is that a planning board issue?
So if we block off access to the road along the water, though, would
That would they would definitely see that as a circulation issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I might look at that and say, Oh, anyhow, that's a different,
Yeah.
that they would definitely see, but.
Well, so, yeah, I wish we actually had the dimensions on that parking area, but what if it, what if there were 6 spots there? Does anybody think that's inadequate? Does anybody think that's too much?
I'd say between 5 and 10 is where we're gonna fall,
So,
I think that's very easy. I think that's doable.
and, because that's not gonna, it's not gonna. It's not gonna challenge existing space that's available or anything like that.
Well,
So,
see, can you go a row on the, we're talking about one row, can you sort of make the footprint more efficient and use the other side of the rectangle?
I guess if you go to those drawings, these are to scale, so it's not the drawing. So I have when I.
Okay, so if it's a little bit, if you look at the lower parking lot, it's a little bit wider to the left, can you get, 3 and 3 or 4 and 4?
It looks
yeah,
bad.
and then you're gonna have people backing into each
Yeah,
other.
maybe it's easier this way, yeah, okay.
But yeah, if there was, half a dozen or,
Half a dozen seems like a reasonable
I
number.
mean, it seems like there's more than. We could do that without modifying anything else regarding circulation. And then have adequate space, I think unquestionably adequate space for the accessible trail and then we could focus on the trail.
Yeah,
But I think so what we're talking about also cutting down, shutting down
Yes.
the unauthorized parking. So the question is whether, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 spaces here, whether it's gonna be, whether we can do things with signage or even with curbing, but something so that when those spaces are full, people are going to see the secondary parking is up by the cabin, not down by the water. where
Yeah,
we usually have
yeah.
parking. 'Cause realistically, we're not gonna have, a lot of.
Well, it'll
enforcement
be
for
electronic,
parking.
it'll say lower lot full, don't go down the road.
So who, I mean, somebody might, was it Brad that mentioned the issue about parking in the winter and actually the parking being probably more heavily pressed in the winter. And I understand what you're saying, Wendy, that we need to focus on the trail, but we can't ignore the fact that the rest of the year exists and that the realities of what else happened. And in the winter, my guess is that people come down, they drive down there so that they can sit on their tailgate and put their skates on. So they can go out and skate. And when there's 15 people playing, with a pickup hockey game out on the pond, they're not gonna put their skates on up in the upper lot and walk down in their skates. They're gonna put their skates on as close to the water as they possibly can.
You'll have benches there. There will be accessible benches along the pond.
I do think that in the winter, you have a lot of people who ice fish on, just living on the pond every weekend.
It may never freeze again.
10 to 15 people out there.
Yeah.
But I
That was not Mr. Not to freeze again.
Freeze, yeah.
We always put our skates on in the dock.
So the parking lots will be dirt.
Yeah.
And well defined out there.
right. Right.
I think 6 is fine. Start with 6.
Okay.
Works for me.
And if it kind of fit within the footprint that you, in your initial layout there, then maybe it makes it easier to segue into, at some later time, a larger design, as opposed to having them reposition spaces.
Right. Okay, so or do y'all still wanna get rid of the road that goes by the pond, or do you wanna keep that for now?
Get rid of it.
I mean, how is that, does that impact what you're working on?
No, I just am saying when I do the new drawing, with that,
Well, Angus, you had a point about, the planning board gonna say now, there's a circulation change and now, so if we do that, do we then open a can of worms?
I mean, could you, I'm not looking to make extra work for you, but could you have like, a phase 1 or phase 2, where the phase 1 doesn't show anything about that? And phase 2 does, and that way, for the purpose of, for instance, a grant application, you're not distracting people with something that's not in fact proposed, because even if the town was all about that, and wanted to get that done, it would still take quite a while. And, you know, to fund it, to build, you know, I think that the focus needs to be the trail. So I feel like if it was a standalone rendering, just showing what we talked about, improvements to the existing parking and improvements to the existing.
Is that what that photograph, I mean, if you are gonna go up towards the dam, you're gonna go right up the road. I mean, I guess you could go along the water, but it would seem the easiest thing would be to be partly on the road. And I didn't hear anybody say they really wanted to keep that road, but, you know, we run into a regulatory buzzsaw.
From a cost standpoint, it's much less money to leave it rather than try to grab out all the aggregate that's in there, and just kind of let it grow in over time.
But you can't very well have an accessible trail coexist with the road.
I'm not saying keep the vehicular circulation, I'm just saying keep the aggregate in place. Just
But
Mm-hmm.
my other thought, though, is coming down from behind the Mill Pond building and then swinging into these parking places could be problematic. You come down that hill and then you gotta head in. I was thinking about that.
Is it wide enough for two cars, one coming up and one going down?
Yeah, it would have, it is.
But that's an issue even coming down the road as well, not just the parking lot, it's coming down that road, you have to be careful someone's not coming up anyway.
Somebody has to stop and pull over.
Yeah,
Okay, so if I'm hearing correctly, you could do two drawings, a phase 1 drawing and a phase 2 drawing. The phase 1 drawing would be everything remains the same, except for just sort of improve the existing parking lot, make sure there's 6 spaces. And then, you know, sort of highlight the all access trail, which I can do. And I'm not, in terms of I mean, so it's a pretty simple drawing. I mean, you know, it's sort of not, there's not a lot to it, really. It's almost an improving the existing conditions, right? So so I guess I could, you know, maybe do a sketch of, you know, a kind of an idea of what it would look like, which isn't much different than just a photograph, really, of what an all access trail looks like. Because again, like, it's gonna change throughout the trail. Like, in some places there might be boardwalk, in some places there might, you know, there might not be. But is that what we're thinking?
Could you also show the picnic areas, have one be accessible with a path?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that.
I think it would be important to have a trail to the dog waiting area, the horse and dog waiting area, that you have a table there now,
Mhm.
that would be.
Just a spur, get one off the main trail. Yeah.
And if you could study the grading from the trail up to the lodge, see if you can make that below 4%.
Okay, 80.
see, everyone's adding more stuff again.
Yeah.
So Brett, just out of curiosity, is it
We're
less than
trying to
4%
keep
or
it
is
focused,
4%
and we keep adding more things.
You need handrails and.
Yeah.
and landings.
Okay, no, I just wanted, because you said less than 4%, so 4% is the limit case that we can go.
Forest Service, and this is the question for Sam. Forest Service has grading requirements that are different for quote unquote requirements, but I think generally speaking, the same one probably require has to be less than 4%. I'm just thinking about, we just built a universally accessible playground at Page, and the Page brings handicap students down to the lodge, and we just want the same spirit and accommodation.
Yeah, I can do that.
Couldn't that be part of the phase 2? I mean, improvements, parking behind the building, a path down to the,
Just to understand if the grading works.
yeah.
at this stage in the game is helpful.
Mhm.
The Lord is already accessible.
Yeah,
Nothing beautiful.
so does that make sense? Trent, so phase 2 would be blocking off the road, adding parking behind the building.
I mean, phase 2 is basically this existing drawing. Okay, yeah, so, yes, okay, I'll do that, phase 1 and phase 2 drawing.
And
And,
how can we get the deck repair on the books, guys?
Oh, yeah, shouldn't that also be part of this analysis, is how the path would need to be improved and need to go over design? Because that's an analysis of that issue is going to be important to the construction estimate.
Well, that has to be done sooner than later. I don't think, that's
I'm not saying it should be before, it's part of the trail.
Yeah, I think that's the next step after we have the conceptual design, then we look at actual construction of the trail. Yeah.
well, I hope it doesn't wash away in the meantime.
okay, I think we're in a good spot.
I think so.
So then the next step would be for us to circulate the revised drawing to the committees and for you to form a working group, right? Because we'll have to go back to CPC to get money for the next step, so there has to be somebody driving this.
So each of the 3 committees, open space, Parks and Rec, and Mill Pond, they're gonna select a member to be part of the working group.
We've got on Wednesday night, our meetings, on Wednesday, so.
Is it posted?
It's what that.
Oh, boy. Oh.
You just hope
Yeah.
get it done first.
Stuff this year, it's not gonna love it. Yeah, right, yeah. You know, 37 steps in postage thing here. John and I had a lovely chat on Saturday or Sunday morning about putting this all together, you know.
All right,
All right.
Great.
thank you, Trent.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's right, 60 room.
Oh, thank you.
I just thought-
Oh, you did well already?
Yeah.
Oh, Jessica has an arrow, that's pretty good. I'm sorry.
I think she's.
Oh, I didn't know for the loud, it's kind of a lot.
That was actually a clap.
Oh, good. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, I was gonna say,